almost to rewrite history as to what happened to the Palestinian people. And I think personally that is unjustifiable. I'm not saying that the Jews haven't been victims. I'm not saying that the Jews are not victims today. They are. In many parts of the world, Jews are persecuted. They are hated. They are. And I think wrongly. And Islamically, I would, as a Muslim, stand up for the Jew. If a Muslim today, God forbid, was to attack you, I would stand up for you. Because this is what my religion tells me to do.
Very good.
Because it says, stand up against injustice. It doesn't matter who it's towards. Whether a Jew, whether a Christian, whether an atheist, it's irrelevant. And Allah says, do not let in the Quran, Allah says, do not let your, I think it says, dislike of a people to make you unjust. So because maybe, you might say, okay, the state of Israel is doing this, I don't like what they're doing. That does not now mean that you can be unjust to all Jews, because that's against Islam. But what I'm finding repeatedly is that there is this campaign over the last 30, 40 years to malign the Palestinian position, which is now widely recognized by many Jews who themselves are proud Jews, practicing Jews, that what's happening to the Palestinian people is wrong. That's why I dislike Joseph's arguments about Palestine and Israel, because he's not honest about it.
Right.
He gives this sort of slant that Palestine did not exist. Then you go and look at some of the old archives and you see the word Palestine on buildings dating back to 30s and 40s.
He's not saying Palestine didn't exist. He's saying
As a state.
He's saying as a state it didn't exist.
The people didn't exist. It was a barren land. And the Jews sort of went there, they built the state of Israel, and there was like just scattered tribes or whatever. When you go back to the old archives of videos and photographs, and in fact, I think there was a Jewish historian, I forget his name now, he said, far from it just being, an unoccupied land, there's a flourishing people here, the Palestinian people. So this rewriting of history I find very uncomfortable, really.
So personally, I haven't read the sources. I don't know.
But Josh, I'd love for you to just watch that debate.
Right.
And the reason why I think it's a very fair debate is because Finkelstein is a professor, well known in his academic accolade, right? Recognized by many Jews as well, that has provided the finest work on history and has made his place in history. And these are some practicing Jews who've said this, right? They might not agree with all of his arguments, right? But they've agreed that, he's an honest, decent fellow, right? You got Dershowitz on the other side, who's a Harvard professor of law, so he's no layperson like me or you, right? He knows the arguments. He writes his book, A Case for Israel. And Finkelstein, to be honest, totally demolishes him. And not only does he demolish him, but he, I think, categorically proves beyond a reasonable doubt that there is actually manipulation and lies when it comes to the case for the Palestinians and their right to exist and the circumstances that arose as to the expulsion of these people. And I think I would assure you, watch that debate and then come back to me. We'll have a discussion about it.
Cool.
But
right,
yeah.
There are some interesting issues though that often get brought up.
Yes.
And actually, I was thinking about one or two of them earlier today. I think I can speak to you about them.
Yeah.
The whole issue about the blockades with Gaza.
Yes.
What do you think the solution is?
Look.
Do you think they should just tear down the wall
Look,
suddenly?
the reality here is this, yeah? If you look at the blockade,
yes.
look at the sources, look at the United Nations, look at Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, what are they blocking?
The settlements?
They're blocking even things like midwife kits for the midwives to give birth to children.
What you mean by blocking,
yeah, right? They're blocking things like chocolate. They're smuggling chocolate in from Egypt, and they're medicine. And they're saying, the scissors can be melted down to make bullets. This is nonsense, come on. This is utter nonsense. And the thing is this, Josh.
But what I'm saying is, do you think they should take down
the wall?
Yeah.
Well, under international law, it's illegal.
But do you think morally...
My Jewish friends
yes.
often say that we have a legal right to Israel because it was given to us by the United Nations. A lot of Jews have said this to me.
Right.
They,
I don't
they,
buy that.
They, well, you don't because you're Orthodox, right?
Even so, I still don't buy it because I don't see United Nations as
Anyway,
particularly legitimate.
exactly. But even if you were to argue
Right.
that, okay, the international community got together and they gave this land to the Jews, it belonged to somebody else, but some of my Jewish friends say to me, oh, but it is justified because it was given to us by a unanimous, let's say, vote within the United Nations, right? I don't agree with that myself because I don't believe that theft can be justified by anybody.
You've got taxes, but you've got taxes.
No, listen. Theft, even if the entire world was to stand up, including the Muslim world, and if they justified theft of Jewish land, I would stand up against them. Why? Because my law doesn't come from what people say.
Right.
My law comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And an injustice to a Jew or a Christian or an atheist is an injustice. I will stand with the Jew, I will stand with the Christian, I will stand with the atheist. Even if my own father is stealing your land, I won't justify it. Okay? Now, so if the United Nations say that this land is going to be given and the Palestinians have to be taken out of this land, for me that's theft. So I don't, but however, my Jewish friends say to me that United Nations have given us this. What about the 70, 80 resolutions that the United Nations have passed against Israel? You don't abide by any of those. You want your cake and you want to eat it. On the one hand, you say that you justify it because they gave it to you, but the 70, 80 United Nations sanctions against you to remove the wall, to remove the blockade, to remove the cattle grids that you have these people walking through like animals. If you look at the Holocaust, the pictures of the Holocaust.
No, we're not going.
No. I'm not equating the two. I believe 6 million Jews being gassed is very difficult to equate to even what's happening to the Palestinian people. But nevertheless, there are some similarities. So for example, where you have those cattle fenced corridors where that Palestinians are shoved into the checkpoints, where they stand in the sun for hours on end, only to be humiliated, when they get to the other end, yes? Many of them turn back. When we look at the pictures of the Nazis when they were cattling like animals, the Jews, how deplorable, how disgusting that was. My question to you, Josh, is this. As a Jew, any similarity to what was done to your people, you should not tolerate when it's done to the Palestinian people. Because as it would hurt you to see those images and be reminded of what happened to you, you should not ever justify that happening to another people. And yet that's exactly what they're doing. The utter subjugation and humiliation of a people, the deprivation, the hit squads that go out every night. Now, this is not me saying it. If you go to ex-Jewish soldiers, the whistleblowers, what are they saying? They say that we will routinely go into 6 or 8 houses every night just to let them know that we are here and we occupy you. We wake up the children, 5-year-olds, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, standing them up. This is utter humiliation of a people. And don't believe me, go onto YouTube, do your own research. Were these really soldiers in the Israeli army? And that they're giving witness statements of how they harass these people on a daily basis. As a Jew, I think you should stand up against that as well. As a Jew, more so. You know why? Because it was done to your people. Humiliation and subjugation and oppression was done to your people. So you should be the loudest voices against this. Really. It's an injustice. It's unfair. Now, I'm not saying, people say, Muslims, they want the annihilation of Israel. They want the annihilation of Jews. I believe that the land was being shared for thousands of years. And the land should be shared today. There should be equal rights for people to work, to travel, to do what they want. If there are criminals that want to cause you harm, arrest them, jail them. Just as if there are criminals within your people. If they're criminals and they want to go out and do violence, arrest them, jail them. but don't humiliate and subjugate and oppress an entire people.
So what do you think the solution should be? Because
Well,
people often talk about the injustices.
There are 2 or 3 solutions.
Right.
Okay, number one,
Let's say you're the Israeli Prime Minister.
Professor
today.
Norman Finkelstein. Professor Norman Finkelstein said something very interesting. He said, just as Gandhi said about India when it split, that I don't accept the legitimacy of Pakistan because they partitioned, right? In I think 1948, Pakistan and India.
47.
47, 48, right? They partitioned, right? Gandhi, as a proud Indian, said, I don't accept the legitimacy of Pakistan, but I accept the reality of Pakistan. Similarly, I don't accept the legitimacy of Israel. And I can't, as a Muslim. As a Muslim, I cannot justify the theft of a land from a people, even if my own father did it, let alone somebody else doing it to the Muslims. So I can't legitimize what they did. But there is a reality now. The land was taken. There are people there. Now, second generation, third generation, what are you going to do with that? So what are you going to do? Well, what you would do if you were fair is you would let people have equal rights to land, to homes, to work, you know, to the politics of the land, to running their affairs. And if you allow that, now, what
So in that vein, do you think therefore they should scrap the Oslo Accords and simply go with, we're opening up equal rights to every resident in Gaza and every resident in areas A and B?
Well, let's look at the Oslo Accords,
Yes.
right? Madeleine Albright, I think, was one of the major, constructors of that accord, if I'm not mistaken. Are you aware of that? I don't know.
I don't know the
Okay.
names of this.
All I know
is
Madeleine
Yasser Arafat and
You know what?
the other
You know what
fellow,
Madeleine
Yasser
Albright said after it was constructed? It's a sort of autonomy for the Palestinian people. Apparently, if I remember rightly, the Oslo Accord meant the Golan Heights was still going to remain within Israel.
Yes.
Israel would still have this, I think, the settlers' road that would dissect Palestinian territory, so you could have military vehicles running right the way through Palestinian land,
Right.
and all of the mountains and hills surrounding the Palestinian areas would still be occupied by Israel. So you'd basically have your guns pointing at the Palestinian people. This is not freedom.
But
That's
not my question, though. My question is...
But my point to you is this: it was a mass prison that they were asking them to take, right?
I understand your
Okay.
position,
Now the point here is this: you would agree, I would hope, that fairness means that there has to be equality between the people, right?
Yes, I agree with you.
So fundamentally, that's not the case in Israel.
So what I'm saying is, if you want there to be the equality that you're advocating, which, okay, so in that case, should we then get rid of the Oslo Accords entirely? Should we then take down the wall from Gaza, make everyone in Gaza an Israeli resident, get rid of the distinctions between areas A, B, and C, right? Get rid of right, and give everyone their citizenship of Israel.
Well, yeah, I think that would be a start. But I think what should also happen is
Because you're not going to get a
the
Palestinian state of that.
hundreds of thousands of Palestinian people that were forcibly removed from their towns, and they lost their lands and they lost their houses. There has to be some compensation, just as the Holocaust compensates the Jews against the governments that were seen as complicit with the Germans, okay, who lost wealth, they lost property, they lost land. There is a compensation for those Jews, right? The Palestinians need to be compensated for their losses,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And there has to be equality.
Right. So after those two things have happened, right? So this is all way theoretical, and I don't think it's going to happen.
It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen, right? But theoretically, they get rid of the wall. They give everyone in Gaza citizenship of Israel. They get rid of the distinctions between the areas A, B, and C, and give all of the residents citizenship of Israel.
They're all equal.
Right? Everyone is equal
and treated equally.
Right? Equal under the law, and they give compensation to those who had their land taken away from them.
Yes.
Right? what then?
Well, hopefully you live in peace, isn't
Good.
it?
Do we then right? Is there then a need for a two states, or is it then simply a binational state?
The thing is this, right?
Because I think a binational state is the best solution.
Right. Look, it's not for me to decide for the Palestinian people what they want.
Right.
You know, I'm not Palestinian. If what they want is a two-state solution, then that's their right to ask for, because within the framework of what they feel is fair, according to what's happened to them, it's their right to ask for what they want, right? But my personal inclination is that it would be better if there was equality. Now, the reason why I believe that the two-state solution is sought after by many Palestinian people is they don't believe that there will be equality. They believe that what will actually happen is it will just be a one state by words, but in action, actually, it will be something completely different.
Like a two-tier system.
A two-tier system, right? And many people, including Mandela, have referred to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians as apartheid. It's a two-state solution. There's two laws, two different roads for people to travel down. You can't travel down this road. You can only use this road. Now, this is apartheid.
Right.
And this has to be wrong.
It's interesting actually, because it seems to me, and I might be wrong about this, it seems to me that whole system of the different mini-states, the different autonomy things, has only come about because of the Oslo Accords. So would you then say, if that is, or was it already this type of two-tier system before that?
Well, look, Josh, if we look at what's been happening since the formation of Israel, there is a relentless agenda to exterminate, to get rid of the Palestinian people. And since the formation of Israel, 1947, right? 48, sorry. That's why I get mixed up with the Pakistani and independence. 48, you have a systematic approach by the Israelis to take all of the land. Now, how can I justify that? How can I evidentially show you that is exactly what's happening? Huh?
The settlements.
You go and look at the map of Israel, 1948, prior to 1948, 67, and modern time today. And you look at the stages, Josh, and what you see is the Palestinian territories, year by year, shrinking. Now, hold on. The thing is this, right? That does not happen accidentally or somehow organically. This is a well-planned, very well-oiled machinery that is systematically taking out these people and stealing their land. Now, what Israel is very clever at is Israel does not want to go in and just bulldoze everything and just take it all in one go. It does it slowly but slowly. It has a long plan. What do we want to achieve in 50 years' time and create the least amount of ripples, right, through the world? We keep our propaganda, we keep all that going really strong, while we keep slowly chopping off a little bit here, chopping a lot of it there. Eventually we get all the land with the minimal amount of disruption and ripples, as it were, around the world, and we accomplish our goal. Very clever. Very, very clever. But that is what's happening, and that's the proof of it is that when you look at those maps, you see that they've stolen they're stealing all the land, all the resources. 98% of the water in Palestine is not drinkable. It's not fit for human consumption. It doesn't happen by accident. The way the water is directed for Israelis and for Palestinians, it doesn't happen by accident. The way that you destroy an economy by when you have a farmer and he has his goods and you let them rot on the checkpoint to destroy the economic stability of that person and those people, doesn't happen by accident. This is systematic and it's wrong. It's really wrong. And I don't say...
I didn't really answer the question though.
Which is what?
Oh, you forgot the question.
No, you said after you scrap it and there's equality, then what? Then what happens?
That wasn't the question you were supposed to...
What was the question? Sorry, what was
the question? Was the two-tier system you're referring to that has been compared to apartheid seems to me to have actually started with the Oslo Accords.
No, it's from the beginning. I said
that. But was there a two-tier system before that?
but I've answered that to you. I said from day one,
There was already a two-tier system.
there's a two-tier system. I'll tell you why there's a two-tier system. If you look at some of the articles which are well referenced, if only Americans knew, I think that's the website. I'd advise you to have a look at the web, and I would say challenge the quotes that they have in there. What you find is that from the very formation of Israel, you have truckloads and truckloads of people on gunpoint being loaded and villages being emptied out to make room.
Right, the Nakba,
That's
right?
a two-tier system.
Right.
How can there be equality if that's happening?
I'm talking about in places where there were both Jews and Arabs living, right, prior to the Oslo Accords. Was there a two-tier system?
Well, I don't know. You tell me.
Because I'm under the assumption that there was not, and there was no two-tier system within the citizenry of Israel during the time. Right? Are you aware of any actual laws that were in place prior to the Oslo Accords that made things different within Israeli citizenry? Because there was no such thing as a Palestinian citizenship before that, because there was no Palestinian territory. What I mean is officially, there was no Palestinian governed territory prior to the Oslo Accords.
Look,
That's what I mean.
this is one of the problems that I find with these type of discussions. To be honest about the question that you've asked, these are the very, very nitty-gritties that I don't have knowledge of, right? No, hold on a
That's
second.
what I'm interested in.
No, but hold on a second. No, but that's not all you should be interested in. And the reason why I say this is this. Because to some extent, it's irrelevant.
Why?
I'll tell you why it's irrelevant. Because you can get very bogged down in these details, which in reality do not affect the overall dynamics of what is happening and what has been happening. Which is that there is a concerted effort to make this a Jewish homeland for Jews and to take out everybody else there who is a non-Jew. So it doesn't change that reality. So when people, and my Jewish friends are very, very good at this, they study these little aspects of what about this, what about that, what about the 6-day war, but they miss out many other details as to what prompted those actions, right? And the fact that it still does not change the overall concept as to why Israel was created and what the foundation of what Israel was going to be. So all of the other things are often excuses but not reasons.
I'm saying, let's agree on those premises of the big macro picture.
Yes.
Right? But on a micro level, right, when we talk about the specific terms that you refer to, like the apartheid comparison, what I'm suggesting is that may not have always been the case. I.e. that specific comparison can only be justified since the Oslo Accords and not prior.
But does it, even if that were true, what difference does that make to the overall situation of what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people?
Because if the problem of apartheid was started by Oslo Accords, then very possibly the logical solution to apartheid is to end the Oslo Accords.
Okay, so but again, what relevance? What relevance? See, look, the point here is this, Josh. Whether you have the Oslo Accords or you don't have the Oslo Accords, for me personally, I think it's irrelevant. I'll tell you why. Israel doesn't abide by any accord that it doesn't wish to. Israel is a law to itself. If the whole world says you've got to do this, Israel just sticks up 2 fingers and says, you know what, we're not going to listen to you. What are you going to do? And the world just sits quietly and they don't say a thing. And the reason why they don't say a thing is that Israel has an incredible reach internationally, and it controls very much so, what people can say and can't say about the state of Israel. And I'll give you an example. The whole thing about if you're an anti-Zionist, you are anti-Jew. I would hope that you know that's nonsense. Now, there are some...
There is definitely a degree of truth in there. But the reason is because there's a huge overlap. The reason for that statement, I think, is not necessarily a propaganda move, and it may have been turned into a propaganda move, but as essence, there's a huge overlap between anti-Zionists and Jew haters.
Well,
a huge overlap.
First of all, that's your perception of it being huge.
It would seem to me that all Jew haters are also anti-Zionist.
Okay, but
not all anti-Zionists are Jew haters.
Yes, but
that's the big overlap I'm talking about.
Right, but Josh, you know why there's a problem there? A fundamental problem.
And I personally am not a Zionist.
Josh, you know there's a fundamental problem there, right? In part, I would agree with you that there are indeed fascist, racist ideologies that masquerade being anti-Semitic by saying that they're actually not anti-Semitic, they're actually anti-Zionist. I agree with you. There are people that are like that. I agree with you that, and you should agree with me, that there are a lot of people who say they're anti-Islam when in fact they're anti-brown face, Arabs, Asians, and what have you, right? Somebody getting arrested. Anyway, irrelevant. The circus goes on. So, what it is?
Someone should tell Abraham he loves getting
what it is, Josh? Yeah, is that I agree with you that there are people who are anti-Zionist. I agree with you that there are people who are anti-Zionist, and when in reality they're actually anti-Jew. They're Jew haters. I accept that. But similarly, there are people who, who might say we don't want Romanian and Polish immigration because of these reasons, but in reality they're just anti-foreign. They're racists. There are people that hide behind those.
Right.
There are loads of people who say, oh, but Islam is not a race, it's a religion, so it's okay to say derogatory things about Islam. But in reality, when you look at their Facebook posts, or when you look at who these people are, a lot of them are actually just completely anti-foreign, anti-Asian, anti-Arab, or whatever it might be. They're racist, right? Now, but the point here is this. Do I now say that you cannot be critical of Islam? No. I say bring it on. I say to everybody, you want to be anti-Islam? Bismillah, bring it on. We'll deal with you. I'm not going to call you an Islamophobe because you are anti-Islam. But if I'm anti-Zionist, people jump up and say, oh, that makes you an anti-Jew. That conflation, I think, is wrong.
Right.
There cannot be a special case for our Jewish brothers and sisters and a different case for everybody else. There has to be equality here.
Right.
And when we talk about, I hear some Jews say to me, oh, but it's because of our special circumstances of the sort of suffering that we had at the hands of Hitler. And I would say, as horrific and as horrible and as depraved as that was, what about the black African? Tens of millions of black Africans were loaded up like cattle on ships, just this far apart on shelves. Their excrement would fall between the planks of the wood, like animals. And half of them would die in the ship before they would get to the... Where's the voices for those black African people? Have they not suffered? What about the Indians? In the Second World War, millions of Indians... That's just one event. Millions of Indians lost their life in the Second World War. Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, right? They lost their lives in the Second World War. Where are the voices for those people? What about their suffering? You go on Park Lane here, there's a memorial for the animals of war. Where's the memorial for the Asian and the black man and everyone else that fought in the Second World War? Where's our memorial? You have one for the donkeys and the mules and the dogs. Yes? There's statues for the dogs, statues for the horses, our lovely animals of war. What about the millions of Indians? What about the Africans? What about so many other nations that lost lives in the Second World War? Did they not suffer? So suffering has happened unanimously, universally. But we need Jewish brothers and sisters, and there are many, by the way, there are many Jews who are actively, far more active than I am, far more knowledgeable than I am, standing up against the state of Israel and the humiliation, the subjugation and the oppression that they do against the Palestinian people. There are voices, and many of them are Jews. Many of them are Jews. And the reason, I remember one of the things that Norman Finkelstein said. He said, both my father and my mother were in concentration camps. His mother, I think, was in Modonohu or Majdanek, and his father was in Auschwitz, yes? Yes. The entire family on his father's side and his mother's side were exterminated. He had no relatives. And he said, it's precisely because of the values of what my parents taught me that I will not stand by and watch Israel do what it does to the Palestinian people. That is a man of character. That is a man of honor, of respect. He suffered greatly. He doesn't talk about it, but he suffered greatly because of the campaign against him. He couldn't get tenure in universities in America and what have you because he spoke out. And when you were smiling, when I said Israel has a very well-oiled machinery where it influences much of what happens in terms of politics, because I know that there is this trope that Jews control all the world. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying Jews control all the world. What I'm saying is that it's but common sense. If I have money and I have power and I have influence, I will use it to better me and better my people. It's logical. This is not some conspiracy where you have to sit in dark rooms smoking cigars, okay, and planning and, this is what we're going to do, right? As the trope would want you to believe. But nevertheless, this is systematic, Josh. This is systematic, Josh, sorry, right? If you look at, for example, during these conflicts, before it was commonly referred to as occupied territories. These territories were occupied. Now you find a lot of the media sources disputed.
There certainly are disputed. And all land is occupied.
Look, when you say disputed, right? There is this air of disagreement.
Yes.
Yes. But if I steal your land, if I steal your garden from the back of your house, yes, we don't call it disputed.
It certainly is disputed.
Well, we call it theft. Because if I were to call it, it's disputed, it somehow vindicates me, the oppressor, the stealer, the one who stole, from the crime of theft. I don't believe that should happen.
Right.
It's not disputed. It is occupied and it's stolen land from the Palestinian people. That is what it is. That is what it should be referred to as.
Excuse me, what's Israel?
We're having a discussion, brother. Sorry. Okay? So, Josh, I'm not trying to badger you. I think you're a nice guy. And you know what it is, Josh? I know that we have an affiliation and a love for our people and our culture and our religion. And when somebody speaks against it in some way, though I'm not speaking against Judaism, I'm speaking about the state of Israel, a political system, because you know, in the Knesset, is it called the Knesset? Knesset, sorry, my dyslexia, right? The Knesset, yes?
Yeah.
Many of those people are not Jews, they're atheists.
Yes.
They don't even believe in Judaism.
Yeah.
They don't follow Judaism.
Yeah.
Many of them profess they don't believe in anything.
Yeah.
But Jewish
Yeah?
is a race.
So
Jewish is a race.
well, when people say Jewish is a race,
It's nonsense.
it's not really, to be honest.
Well, I know a lot of Jewish in
Well,
Manchester, they're atheists. They don't
There are a
believe
lot of Russian Jews
But there's also a
who
lot
are not.
of Jews.
Are the Russian Jews Semitic?
Semitic.
Semites from the lineage of Ibrahim.
Yeah.
Ibrahim alayhi
The
salam.
Russian Jews, yes.
The Khazars, Khazarian Jews. They're not Semitic people, are they?
Khazarian Jews don't exist anymore.
But because their descendants exist, right?
No, their descendants don't exist.
But are you telling me that all of those people have been completely wiped out?
That kingdom disappears. Who
But-
knows what happened to them?
If you look at the Sephardi Jew,
Yes.
the Sephardi Jew looks more Middle Eastern.
Yes, because that's where they lived.
Okay, but that's the way they live. But the history is not tens of that.
And I know plenty of Sephardim or
My
whites,
point,
by the way.
fair enough. So do I, right? But my point to you is that not all the Jews unanimously can trace their lineage from Ibrahim alayhi salam, Prophet Abraham. There are converts who came very,
Right, sure, there are
right?
converts, yeah.
Okay, that does not mean to say that I'm advocating that you can now hate Jews and claim it's a religion and it's not a race, because I believe, to me, it's irrelevant.